Hello everyone, and welcome to our second video on melody writing. Today we're going to be looking at a few different things, and by the end of today's lesson you will be writing your own melodies. So here's our objectives for today. We're going to learn about the typical tonic and dominant phrase endings, so you should recognize those words tonic and dominant, tonic being the first scale degree in a given scale, and the dominant being the fifth scale degree in a given scale. We're going to look at voice leading, and we're going to compose two 8-bar melodic ideas with different voice leading options. So I'm actually going to compose 3 for you, and then you're going to actually compose 2 of your own separately. So let's do a quick review of what we learned last lesson, just to make sure that we're up to date and not forgetting anything. The length of a melody, which we call a melody a complete sentence, is called a period. Now remember that we often misname a phrase as being a sentence, but a phrase is really just a component of the sentence that is the period. A period typically contains 2 phrases, and those phrases come in 2 types: antecedent and consequent, the question and answer. Every scale degree in a key has a name, but the most important ones are the tonic, the dominant, and the leading tone. We'll be looking at those quite a bit today, as well as the supertonic, but the 1, 5, and 7 are the ones that I recommended that you memorize right off the bat. Melodies are a collection of intervals, which are steps and leaps, in this case, melodic intervals. If you have too many steps, your melody can end up being quite boring. And if you have too many leaps, it just sounds random and lacks cohesiveness. Question and answer phrases, that is, antecedent and consequent phrases, relate in 3 possible ways: either through repetition, through contrast, or through variation, which is a mixture of the 2. So how do we start writing a melody? Now here's, I'm going to ask for just a teensy bit of patience, as I've kind of pre-composed all of these melodies, and we're going to be looking at them today, and I'll kind of compose them on the fly. So hopefully they match up with everything that I put in the notes. So we'll see what happens here. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to start with the tonic, so that we know what scale we're in. That's the first note that we want to have in our piece of music. We also want to make it long enough so that it's kind of obvious. We don't want it to be a 16th note, or it'll be too fast. So we're going to hop into our score here. So again, we're working in 2/4 time, just because it's a little bit shorter, the melody, that way, and we don't, let's say, run out of melodic ideas before we get into writing too far. So I'm going to start off here with just, I think, a 1/4 note. We're writing in C again, just once again, because it is an easy key to work with, since there are no sharps and flats. So we're going to put a C there as our very beginning note. The next thing we're going to do is make sure that we end with the tonic. So I'm going to make it a half note, and I'm going to put both the low C and the high C there, just to give us some options. I don't know if I want to end on the same note as I start, or maybe I'll end a little bit higher, just to make it seem like that melody has traveled upwards throughout its entire time. So flipping back over to PowerPoint here, end with the tonic so that it feels like we're going home. Now we've got the first half of our first bar done, and we've got our last bar done. So that's 25% almost of our piece is already written for us. So step 1 complete. Now the next thing that we need to look at is cadences. In particular, we're going to look at our phrase cadence today. We aren't going to talk about cadences in too much detail, just some basic information on it. Now, a cadence is a Latin term, actually, and it really just means footfall, the idea of putting your foot down, and we treat it as going home. So you can have a cadence at the end of a phrase, you can have a cadence at the end, you will always have a cadence at the end of a melody of some type, and you can have larger structural cadences, like at the end of a movement, or at the entire end of a song. And you do have cadences. A cadence is really the end of whatever piece of music you have. The antecedent, or the first phrase, the question phrase, should not end on the tonic, generally speaking. It just sounds too final. It sounds like the melody is ending there, but we actually need it to be, pardon me, two separate phrases. A common place to end that antecedent phrase is on the dominant, on the fifth scale degree. That's going to give it a feeling of suspension, like it wants to continue on somewhere. So, as I said, we're going to end that first phrase on the dominant. So let's go over here, and we're going to put, let's just do a quarter note on the dominant here. So the dominant being the fifth scale degree, right? If we're doing our first scale degree, oopsie. Our first scale degree, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's our fifth scale degree. Now I'm going to leave a rest here. The reason I'm not doing a half note here or something else, I want to hit the end of the phrase right on the downbeat, because that downbeat will give us a solid sense of ending. And I'm leaving a rest here. Now, when we go back to the really early levels of music creation, say the 1100s, when we have some of our first notated music, the music was really all done through voice, not through instruments. So one thing that a prof of mine used to say was that the phrase of music is carried on the breath. You need to give space for the singer to breathe. And likewise, most of you play wind instruments, so it's really important to leave space in order for your instrumentalists to breathe as well. So we usually leave some kind of break. If you're going to do a half note, maybe leave a breath mark or something like that, so that we've got some clear space to breathe, and that indicates that the phrase is ending. Next thing you'll want to do is fill in your first phrase using a combination of rhythms and notes. So try to avoid repeating too much, either using the same rhythms over and over again, or using the same notes over and over again. And you want to make sure that you use a mixture of leaps and steps, because remember, of course, that leaps, too many of them, it's going to start to sound random, and too many steps can sound boring. So I'm going to pop back in here, and let's see. I kind of want my melody to travel in a general upwards line, because I'm starting kind of low. We don't have a lot of space because we're only in 2/4, so I think I'll start off with a couple of eighth notes, quarter notes, yeah. So this has kind of got this nice sounding bum bum. So it's traveled all the way up back to the tonic there. I don't want to keep going up, that's a little bit too much. So let's come down here. So now we've got our first phrase pretty much done. So let's listen. Almost has a little bit of an I'm a little teapot, short and stout kind of feeling to it. It's not not quite the same, but yeah, so it's unique, at least in this case. I'm not copying anybody else's work. Okay, so we've got first phrase complete. Second phrase is 25% complete, so that's pretty good. So there we go. Now move on. So you can start your next phrase on any note that you want. The tonic is a predictable place to start. It reinforces that feeling of being in the key of C, but you can pretty much start wherever you like. Fill in the first 2 bars of the consequent answer phrase, but don't go too far with that. So let's see here. Oh, and in the example that I did, I'm going to try variation. So we're going to use sort of some of the same rhythms, but we'll definitely use different notes. I think in this case, I'm going to start on the tonic because I do like that feeling of clearly we are in the key of C. And I'm going to use the same rhythms. Let's go with that. So we'll use the same rhythms, but these are clearly different notes. And we'll go back to the same rhythms. So that's quite some variation. So if we hear this, we've got lots more leaps here. So in our first phrase, we have a leap from the C to the E. We've got a leap from G to B, A to C, and we've also got lots of step motion here. There's some step motion in our first measure, and then leap, leap, leap. That's not too bad. So I've got my next 2 bars complete. And as you can see here, I did start on the tonic, and I could have started somewhere else. Let's kind of see what it sounds like if I wanted to start somewhere else. Like, what if I did this? What if I started on the 6th? Oh, I like that too. Okay, so we've got a few, different options. And like I said, you can kind of start anywhere. I would maybe avoid the leading tone as a starting place, the 7th note, just because it has this desire to move in a different direction, in a specific direction. And let's actually talk about that now. Pardon me. So, voice leading. Voice leading is the direction that any given note in a scale wants to move, the next note that it wants to have, specifically in a cadence. So it's important at the end of our melody here that we get back to the tonic, whether that's the 1 or the 8, but it has to make sense to the ear. If we go there from a random note, it's going to sound incomplete or just a little bit awkward. And we definitely don't want to jump from a note that's far away, like the 4th or maybe the 6th. So it's just going to sound awkward. So voice leading is the direction that certain scale degrees want to move, and there are sort of like in a melodic cadence, there are sort of like 3 different ways that we want to happen. So cadential motion is the cadence being the end of our phrase or the end of our melody. Cadential motion is the specific voice leading for how we're going to get back to the tonic. It all depends on which note you're coming from. So if you are on the 2nd note, like your last note is the supertonic, you want to go down to the tonic. You don't want to jump up to the 8. If you're on a 7, you want to go down, or you want to go up, I should say, to the 1 or 8, whatever, in this case, it's really going to be the 8. And if you're on the dominant, you can go either direction, up or down to the 8. This is typically how you end your melody, because we are always wanting to go towards that 1. We want to use these voice leading options to get there. There are other voice leading, like 4 wants to go to 3, 6 wants to go to 5, but we're not going to worry about those because that only happens within the chords or the supporting voices, the harmony voices. Since we're just concerned about getting back to the 1, these are the 3 voice leading options we're going to do. So let's see here. I'm going to hop back over to my drawing here, or my melody that I've written here. So I just really need to do this last bar, and I can end in a few different ways, and I'm going to figure out what I want to do with this last note here. So let's start off with that one option of going from 2 to 1. So let's go with a D, and I'll delete that higher note. So we've got 2 going down to 1, and I just need to lead into it with something. So if we're going from E, like I wouldn't want to go to, say, like it's going to sound really awkward. So let's just back this up a little bit so you can kind of hear. That seems a little bit too much of a jump. So I'm going to go with an F and an E. So jumping back to the beginning of that phrase. Beautiful. So there's a clear ending. We're back down to the tonic. You can hear that natural 2-1 motion. So we've got there our 2-1 cadence. And actually one thing I forgot to do here, let's make that a half note. No need to end it too abruptly. I'm going to copy this melody over, and we're going to change our ending here. So let's say, what if I wanted to end my melody a little higher? Oops. So we end on the high C. Maybe, pardon me. Maybe we want to do the 7/8 motion, and so the 7/8 motion, we could go down to the low 7 up to 1, but I think we'll go here. So let's give our 7/8, in this case going to be B. So we have that motion there, and then we'll lead into it. Maybe I'll stick with that. I like that, the 2 8th notes leading up into it. So I'll go G, A, B. I went too far back. There we go. Let's give it a listen to just this phrase. See, it also has a very home-like feeling to it. And actually, you know, if I put both of these next to each other, there we go. So if I put these right next to each other, you're actually going to hear that they sound really good together because they're both using the correct voice leading rules. Do you hear how nice that actually sounds together? So we've actually combined two pieces of voice leading here, and it works great. So we'll stick with this though. There's our phrase ending. So we're doing that way. Oopsie. So go back to PowerPoint here, and you can see we've done the 7/8 motion. So the last option for us to do is the oops, I don't want to show you that yet. Is the 5-to-1 motion. So we're going to copy. Oh, did I need to do that way? Yes, I did. So we're going to copy this guy over, and we'll delete my last measure here. So let's do the 5-1 motion that we need. No, I don't want it there. Let's go there. Good. And I don't really have to use 8th notes. I can actually just stick with quarter notes. So let's do an F, and then it matches the rhythm of the top bar here, even though it's traveling in the opposite direction. Let's hear what this sounds like. See? Also perfectly acceptable, that 5-1 ending. Oh, and I actually went to the high C versus the low C in this example. So just for the sake of continuity, let's make this. There we go. So we've got our 5-1 motion. And frankly, like I did change that sort of previous F rhythm just to make the cadence overall sound better. So let's do a review. We start the phrase 1 with the tonic note. It should be long. You definitely don't want a 16th note, otherwise it's just going to sound like we're rushing past it. It's really hard to figure out what key we're in. End the first phrase on the dominant or the 5th note, and the second phrase on the tonic, which will be 1 or 8. And fill in the first phrase. Once you've filled in the first phrase, you can start the second phrase, the consequent phrase, but make sure that you kind of hear exactly what you are wanting to start with, because it might sound a little bit awkward, especially if you start on the 7th. Tonic is always a safe and easy place to start. Fill in the first couple of bars using repetition or variation, but make sure that your cadence going into that final tonic follows the voice leading rules. So that's it. There's kind of your entire, I guess, method for writing a simple melody. Now I've taken here one of the melodies with the 5/1 cadence and kind of set it to an accompaniment, so you can kind of hear how it would sound if it was a little more complete. So here we go, and you can see I've obviously moved it up the octave because I chose to set it for flute. It's still only 8 measures, but instead of being separated across 2 systems, it's just in one long line. And I've set particular chords against the melody, and we're going to learn how to do that in a future lesson. So you'll definitely want to get these melodies completed so that you can figure out how to do your chords. But let's give this a listen to. Yeah, it's not going to win any awards or anything, but it definitely sounds nice. It's got an attractive flow through it. It's definitely got a nice kind of rise and fall over the course of the entire duration of the melody. So there we go. That's it for this lesson. In your assignment, like I said, you are going to be composing 2 of your own melodies. One with different voice leading endings, but they'll be completely separate melodies as well, and then we'll use those in the future for setting accompaniment and determining chords and that sort of thing. So that's it. As always, feel free to drop me a line anytime you don't have or anytime you have questions, and I hope this made sense and it didn't run on quite too long. That's it from me. We'll see you next time.